Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Christ MotoGP Podcast. And we come from Silverstone as Enea Bastianini makes it the perfect weekend in MotoGP's return, Pete. It was a pretty much perfect weekend for the other side of the factory Ducati box. And we'll come on to what happened to Pecco Bagnaia in a bit. But just a bit on today's race, Pete. It maybe wasn't a classic that people were expecting, but yeah, the right man won, and he pretty much showed that for Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, as Marc Marquez, who we heard speak not long ago, said, on his day, Bastianini's unbeatable, and this was one of his days, wasn't it? Where, or indeed his weekend, as you put it. The sprint, the first sprint win he's had, and now the double with the Grand Prix as well. And yeah, fighting through as he did in the main race today, taking the lead. Really, really, it just looked like the writing was on the wall, wasn't it? As he was coming through in those last laps, everyone knows how strong he is, how good he is at saving the tyres, and yeah, the beast is there now. Third in the championship, he took that over for Marc Marquez yesterday, and yeah, there's a lot of people here who are saying that he's one to watch for the title.
And a lot of people, including myself, you couldn't write him off, only 49 points back. And let's be honest, there's still half a season to go. Anything's really possible, and it's kind of reinvigorating Bastianini because he knows he's not at Ducati next year. He's going to KTM, and have Ducati kind of made this announcement too early, and it's given him more of a chance to just go and do his own thing because he's not really going to play the team game, is he?
Well, yeah, that's it, isn't it? I mean, they obviously hired him, didn't they? 2 years ago because they knew his talent. Unfortunately, last year he was injured, and we never really got to see the real Bastianini and what he could do on the factory bike. And then the decisions were made pretty early on this year for next year and beyond. So we know he's out, and we were all speculating, weren't we, that what if the world champion leaves Ducati for another team? And we were thinking Jorge Martin, of course, weren't we? Who was leading the standings. Now there's another risk. There's a double risk, you might say, because Bastianini is putting himself in there as well. Bagnaia mistaking the sprint, and stopping that momentum of again that he built up with Martin, and then also breaking. Well, his teammate breaks his run of victories that he's had on the Sunday. So yeah, it's all to play for now, isn't it?
It is all to play for, and Jorge Martin now leading the World Championship. It's the perfect response, really, after what happened in Saxony. We mentioned it last week that it was a big weekend for him to come in and try and break Bagnaia's stronghold, really, on it. And it has happened. It wasn't Pecco's greatest weekend, but Martin can take some confidence going into Austria that he's got that lead back, and it really shouldn't have annoyed him over the summer because he did say on Friday that he wasn't really in the mood to look at MotoGP. But this is the perfect response for him, isn't it? To come back at Silverstone, first race back, and re-establish himself as the championship leader.
That's right. Yeah, there was a lot of questions, weren't there, on Thursday? Do you know what went on? Are you sure it won't happen again? And he didn't want to go into it, as you say. He didn't want to dive into it and keep digging it up. But he sort of said that they might have found something and some reason. But he said it sort of cryptically that it's not something to easily to work on when you're riding and in a race situation. But then out he goes on Friday, leads free practice, leads practice too, and I think that probably was the foundation for his strong weekend, wasn't it? He knew, yeah, I'm fast, I'm back at the top of the timesheets, and okay, he didn't obviously get to beat Bastianini, but he took points off Pecco in both races, and as you say, regains the title lead. So it's now only a couple of points, but still, he's done what we said he needed to do, which is you have a big mistake and then you fight back immediately from it. So as we said, all to play for really now, and two-way fight, three-way fight soon.
Yeah, three-way fight, and Pecco Bagnaia this weekend. It was. It seems like when it's going so well for Bagnaia, there's always one race and it was the sprint where he made the mistake and the crash happened, and he kind of, I wouldn't say salvaged the third place today, but he didn't look his best in the Grand Prix. Would that be fair to say that when you have a crash in the sprint, especially at a track like Silverstone where the temperature is so, it's colder, you lose track time essentially, and it can cost you. And we've seen it in the past as well when he had crashes or issues in the sprint. And I think of Le Mans, it's kind of similar to that. He just kind of salvaged something this weekend, but a third place, not what he probably would have wanted, but I'd say it was a good salvage job.
Yeah, he bought the bike. We were speaking about it when we last night, that, Pecco tends to make his mistakes in the sprint and then he can get the big points back on the Sundays. And he's kind of done that again. As you say, it's not a great weekend for him, but ultimately he's put the bike on the podium in the main race and limited the damage at least. And, on a day when he just didn't have the pace, did he? And as Martin said, he didn't have the pace to stay with Bastianini either. It was just one of Bastianini's days where he blasts off into the distance, and you've got to make the best of it, haven't you? If you're in the championship fight, do the best you can, get the solid points. Bagnaia's on the podium. Was looking a bit close with Marc at the end. Was it Marc Marquez was catching him, and he could have another couple of laps. Who knows? But anyway, he got the job done. Got a rostrum. But as we say, that winning run of Sundays is now over, and he's as I say, he knows that there's multiple threats, we say now. And it's not just Martin, it's also the guy on the other side of the garage. So on the other hand, Pecco can now learn from Bastianini as well, look at his data, see his speed, and maybe find something to help his own his own performances. But yeah, as you say, difficult weekend with the temperatures here, cold weather, a lot of riders talking about tyre wear and things like that, and sort of being surprised in a bad way about how much they struggled in the race, for the longer race on Sunday, moving up to the medium tyres and things like that. A bit of head scratching by quite a lot of teams as to where the grip went, but to come away from, let's say, a difficult weekend, he's in third place after the fall in the sprint, and now everybody moves on to Austria, which, as we know, is a strong track, isn't it, for Ducati, and it could be a great showdown. And Pecco,
yeah, it is. And I just want to go back to Enea Bastianini. I think it's easy to say it's his best weekend ever in MotoGP. Getting his first sprint podium and it being a win, it's took him this long. And the performance today, especially on how he was able to keep the rear tyre from having the issues that the other two 24s really had at the front, was something really special, I think. And we heard Elisa's father was speaking with us after, and kind of likening it to Danny Pedrosa, how Bastianini is able to save his tyre and he's able to use it to his advantage because of his he's a lot smaller, of course, and he's able to do that with this Ducati and the rear tyre, especially the new one. Yeah. If he can keep this up, surely the Bagnaia just can't expect him to be his teammate in this fight, because he's like I say, he's only 49 points behind.
That's right, yeah, and he's off to another factory. He's off to Tech2R KTM next year, Bastianini. So he has no future allegiance to Ducati, should we say? And I mean, the big question now is how many more Bastianini days are we going to have, isn't it? That's the big question. Can he do this week in, week out, or is it going to be, at tracks where there's a big amount of tyre wear, he's able to make a bigger difference? But what about the tracks where it's not such a problem? Can he qualify well? That's always been the first thing for him, isn't it? Qualify well, get a good decent start on the grid, and not suffer too much in the early stages. And the way we saw him fighting through the field, it was really impressive, wasn't it? And but yeah, that's the big question mark, really. Is can he keep that up? Can he keep that sort of front running performance up? Because I think it's hard to fault his performances really this weekend.
You can't really fault it. And he even had the issue in Friday practice where he lost on his vice due to an engine problem. It didn't even seem to bother him. He just got on with his program and we qualified on the front row. He said he needed to change that going into the second half of the year, but he said he didn't really change anything because he felt that maybe luck was a factor in the first half of the year. He felt he was unlucky with yellow flags and stuff in the first half of the year in qualifying. So if he's in the right side of luck, this is going to be a good time for Enea, and he's coming to tracks that he does like in the next few rounds. So, Enea Bastianini putting down the perfect start to his second half of the season. I want to talk about the GP23s, Pete. It was, I would say you could see the gap is quite noticeable between the 24 and the 23. Marc Marquez crashing out of the sprint yesterday, went in fourth. It was a costly mistake, really, for Marc, but he got a fourth place again today, and it could have been a third place if there was one more lap, because he was really catching Bagnaia at the end, who was struggling so much on the rear. But Marquez kind of hinted in Germany that he needed to have a perfect start to the weekend, but he didn't really have it here, did he? But he kind of salvaged that in the end.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he said he was sort of always playing catch-up, wasn't he, this weekend, and then obviously falling in the sprint as well. that, the last thing he needed, as he said, was to make the same mistake again in the main race. And so he was a little bit conservative. And he did say, didn't he, that, without that crash yesterday, maybe I'd have got a podium today, meaning maybe he would have taken a few more risks. Maybe he could have got Bagnaia, because certainly he had the pace at the end there, didn't he? The GP23s, as you say, it seems to be different to the 24s. They might not have the outright performance, but they didn't, don't seem to suffer from the same things. They don't seem to have the same problems. And so different tracks, or different times of the race even, you get the 23 riders are stronger or weaker, and certainly strong charge by Marc at the end, almost, less than a second from Pecco. And as he said, what he need, and as you said, what he needs is to put the whole weekend together. But as he said, you shouldn't be surprised coming to a new team and a new bike that you have weekends like this, that you turn up at a track that you've never ridden this bike on. You have a setup, and sometimes it works. And say you gave the example of Jerez, you go out the pits, the setup works, great, fantastic. Other times, like here, it doesn't work, and you're struggling. As he was telling us on Friday, he was struggling, wasn't he? And then you've got to really turn the bike upside down, get things to happen. And he was really happy, wasn't he, with his pace at, in the race today on the medium tyre, the medium rear tyre. That was the crucial thing for him. He said he's never been fast on this medium tyre. So they're learning still as the races go on, round 10 of 20. Yeah. But he doesn't really know until he turns up at a track and he goes out and does a few laps exactly what sort of weekend he's going to have. But certainly for Marc, he wants to know what he can do with a perfect weekend, where everything just runs smoothly. Now, knowing the bike as he does, I think he knows he could be up there fighting for the win. But as things stand, here we are halfway through the season, and no win yet. So he's got to keep looking for that.
He does, yeah. Like he said to us after, it's 4 or 5 seconds over a race where the GP24 roughly is having that advantage. And it might not seem like a lot when we say it, but it really is, because with like 2-3 times a lap, and you're like, it's a puzzling time for all the GP23 riders, but especially Marquez, because he's the one taking it to them on a regular basis, isn't he?
He is, yeah, and I suppose we should expand that. It's not just the GP23s that are looking at that 4 or 5 second gap. We've heard the Aprilia riders, the KTM riders, all sort of asking, what are Ducati doing that's getting them to pull away so much during the weekend? We had Pedro Acosta, wasn't it? He thinks it's a lot of it's down to the number of bikes that they have, but certainly that evolution during the weekend, and the GP24s come the Sunday, they're just always there, aren't they, at the front? And I suppose we should say, looking at the GP23s, going back to your question, Giannantonio, it was a good race, and not far from Marquez, on that same bike.
Not even, it was like 9 tenths in the end. He was right behind Marquez,
So it wasn't just Marc on his own on the 23 and a big gap to the next 23, should we say? Digi again, his future was sort of unofficially confirmed this weekend, wasn't it, by Ducati team manager David Tardozzi, who spilled the beans and said that Digia will be on the factory spec bike at VR46. Digia wouldn't confirm that, but did admit that it would be quite nice if that happens. So I think we can look forward to an announcement on that in the near future. And that stability is obviously going to help his season, isn't it? He can just focus on the racing now, and he's in great form. And to finish, as you just said, less than a second with Marc on the same bike, that's a great job.
Yeah, it is a great job, and I think he shows again, like you said, unofficially, Davide Tardozzi just kind of spilled the plans for VR46 in 2025 with Frankie Morbidelli going there alongside Digia. He'll be riding the 24 from what he said, and Giannantonio, you can see the confidence of him when you come to a race. You see that he's kind of grown so much, and he's speaking about, like you say, not even a second behind Marquez. And he is, he's really impressive, the performances that he's putting in, because we know you can see the gap between, like you say, the 23 and the 24, but also to be beaten a factory Aprilia as well, and Lisa Spargo today, who had such great pace and looked like he would be challenging for the victory. Giannantonio can take a lot of positives going into the second half of the year, and I would expect that podium for him, it's going to come at some point, surely, won't it?
Surely, yeah. As you say, and as Marquez said as well, beating Aleix around here on pole position, wasn't he? New lap record, winner last year. He's a fast rider around here. The Aprilia's fast around here, and Marc said, we're doing a good job. We finished ahead of Aleix, as you say. Giannantonio did as well. So, yeah, the GP23 guys, they're doing well, but there is still that clear gap to the top three guys on the 24. Obviously, Morbidelli having a bit of a weekend to forget again with that big accident in the sprint race and everything else. Double long lap penalty for that in the main race. So, yeah, a complicated year for Morbidelli continues on the fourth GP24, but certainly those top three guys, it's, there's a lot of head scratching among the other teams, isn't there? Why, come the Sunday, it's always those guys that are up there.
Yeah, and Alex Marquez kind of joked that he hopes that Gigi Dall'Igna takes a long holiday because he doesn't want to develop in the 25 any better for next season. So it just shows that, Alpine is so much clearer of the other Ducatis, but then the gap to the other manufacturers is still, it's there. And I want to come to Aprilia, at least Spadro. He was Aprilia's real shining light this weekend. A fantastic pole position that he took in, and a good solid podium for him in the sprint, and he had tried out that hard front where it was a good sign for today, but the temperature was a bit on the edge, but he made it work in the first part of today's race and then dropped off. Kind of a sort of what could have been for him, really, but like you said, the step that the Ducatis made, kind of, that was kind of his race, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. You mentioned the hard front tyre, wasn't it? He chose that, and there was a lot of people going, is that a bit risky with the cool temperatures? Most people played it a bit safer, went with the medium. But as he said, it wasn't the hard front that was his problem in the race. He said that saved it. It was the rear that he was struggling with, that drop in grip. That was his big problem today, and he felt he could do nothing more. So he certainly didn't regret going with the hard front. Not easy in those early laps when you're waiting to get up to temperature on a fast track like this. We saw Raul Fernandez, didn't we, on the hard front fall and completely unintentionally his bike wipes out his own teammate Miguel Oliveira. That's the kind of thing that happens with a hard front tyre in cold conditions in the early laps, isn't it? But Aleix got through that, was with the Ducatis, and as we were watching it, we thought, he's going to come on strong at the end. The hard front will benefit him there, but of course it was the rear tyre that kind of was the weak point, if you like, in the Aprilia package. And Maverick Vinales emphasised that for him. It was to a much bigger degree. He just couldn't understand why that they're losing so much grip. He has such a drop, if you like, in rear grip during the races, and he said it's something we've got to get on top of because we're just losing ground all the time. He just doesn't feel like he's got any grip, and that's holding him back at the moment. So, but Aleix, after obviously the injury at Assen, wasn't it, and things like that, and he's been outpaced by Vinales at a few races, and Oliveira was on form at Sachsenring, wasn't he, just before the summer break. Now we see Aleix back, so it was still a good weekend for Aleix, and as he said to us, he couldn't do any more, so there we are. Obviously, sixth place. I mean, it's a good result.
It was a decent result, yeah.
Yeah, top obviously non-Ducati. I'm just looking. Yeah, I mean, all the Ducatis are what? Yeah. Morbidelli's 10th, even after doing a double long lap penalty. He's last of the Ducatis, so it really does show the dominance that they have at the moment. And as we've said, the other teams are trying to work out what do we need to do. But as Acosta says, he thinks it's a big part of that is that the amount of data that they get. 8 bikes, 4 factory bikes. They're able to use that and just keep improving right up to the start of the race mission.
Yeah, and Costa, especially the KTM riders, they had a mixed day today, and even yesterday they showed real strong pace in the sprint feed. It was quite, I thought it was quite encouraging, despite him and Binder coming together. And Acosta said to us in the debrief that his bike essentially felt like a plane with just one wing, and the balance was all off. But he was still in 4th place after, of course, Bagnaia and Marquez crashed out. It was a promising sign, I think, heading into today. But Binder having a clutch issue at the start, and he didn't do anything. It was a short race for Brad, and then Acosta struggling on the rear. It seemed that there was the issue, and he just dropped back to 9th. It's one of those weekends for KTM that's it's a head scratcher, really.
Yeah, as you say, top KTM in 9th. Acosta. I mean, I think he was speaking afterwards that he still believes the bike will be more competitive than this when they get to the tracks with the slower corners, the medium corners. He doesn't think the high-speed flowing corners, of which there's a lot here at Silverstone, he doesn't think that suits the bike. So he thinks this is almost kind of a worst-case scenario in terms of the circuit. He still holds out hope that when they get to half a dozen other tracks that he rolled off the names of, with the stop-go sort of nature, that they'll be more competitive than here. But he also said that they need to come up with. They need to get that consistency, which we've said about KTM for a long time. But so their results on their bad days are, fifth or sixth. They're not bottom of the top 10 if they want to fight for the title. And that's what he said is, maybe they need to lose something from their strength. So maybe they don't have the favorite tracks or the strong tracks and the weak tracks. Just try and get in that sort of narrow, that that medium band of performance, raise that to a higher level so that they're constantly up there week in, week out, top 6 contenders. That's what he's aiming for. And he certainly thinks that they need to try and make the bike work on circuits that are more flowing. Maybe not having the stop go lines, the V lines into the corner, making the bike work with a more flowing style, even if it does cost them at some other tracks. He thinks that that's what they need, because at the moment tracks like this really don't suit their bike. But as you said, they started the weekend well, didn't they? And they were looking strong. But it's just, again, you get to Sunday afternoon and the Ducatis, it's almost like they sort of show their true colours, don't they? And unleash their full performance. And suddenly everyone else is there sort of looking around wondering, where did they go?
So, yeah, like you said, it's almost like they find an extra gear almost, and they just kick into it. And, KTM, I think, they had a really strong start, like you say, but going to Austria next for them, or home race, it's going to be a very, I think it'll be a tough weekend, because we know how strong Ducati usually are. And I think it's, they're just going to have to maybe bite the bullet and just try and figure out how they can get around these issues. And staying with KTM, especially their riders, Jack Miller this weekend, it was an okay weekend for Jack, but more on his future. This question, he's kind of sounding like maybe this is preparing to leave MotoGP, really, and there's no real option for him at the minute, Pete.
Yeah, which is, it just seems a bit of a surprise, given that there are quite a few seats, about half a dozen seats that are still to be decided for next year. But Jack was pretty bleak, wasn't he, when he was talking to us, really over most of the days when he was talking about his future. It was almost, I'm just trying to make the most of these next 10 races, and because the phone's not ringing, he's using phrases like that, and that he's got nothing lined up, and really quite surprising. Even when the superbike possibility was brought up, he insisted that he doesn't have anything there either. So it's he needs results, as he said. He needs some results. There was a bit of a question of whether do people have short memories, in terms of what Jack's done in the past, and have people forgotten that too quickly, and they've forgotten what he's brought to the KTM project and things like that. But either way, quite surprisingly, really, as I say, for someone who's won races on a Honda, on a Ducati, and with all his experience, you think that there would be a place for him on this grid. And but he says it's not looking good. So let's wait and see. Again, it's a results-based business, isn't it?
It is.
One good result could just change everything for him. I think that's the thing to remember. But yeah, I think a lot of us were quite surprised that it does seem quite the situation for next year for him is quite that bleak.
Yeah, it does seem that way, and you don't know who he's talking to. You don't know if it's just, it could be something that could come out of the blue. But yeah, Jack Miller's situation is, I think, it's ever changing, and I don't think it'll be long before we find out where he's going to be, really, at the end of the season. But yeah, big work for KTM to do on and off the track, and I think it's going to be a tough ask for them to try and take it to Ducati in Austria, but who knows, home race for them. They're going to have a lot of support there, and we'll see what happens. Just to focus on the Japanese manufacturers, I want to focus really on Honda. I think it was a weekend where you've seen, especially Luca Marini, I think he's looking the most comfortable that he's looked on the Honda so far. There's positive signs coming from him, but he still says that there's a mountain to climb, really. But, he had the tire pressure issue in this race, and it robbed him of another point. But you can see that they're running two different specs. Him and Mir are running a different one to Nakagami and Zarco, and they're giving conflicting messages with Mir saying he doesn't really like it, but Marini likes it because it's a bit slower and he can then pinpoint the issues that the Honda has. Baby steps, isn't it, Pete? But it's one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, Zarco was the top guy, was he, for the Hondas? But they were all together, weren't they? Really, in both races, it was Zarco and then the Repsol guys, and as you say, they're on different specs at the moment as far as the engines, especially. And Zarco and Nakagami seem to be on sort of the earlier spec, which actually has more performance. But
Yeah,
the spec that Barini and now Mir are on, it has less performance in a straight line, but they believe that's the direction for the future. So Marini's sort of fairly certain about that, as you just said, Jordan, and so he's happy to keep working on that. Mir actually said, "Look, I don't like this engine; it's too slow," and went
yeah,
back to the old one, and then came to Sachsenring, and I think they kind of asked him, "Look, could you keep using this newer engine because we want to develop in this direction and get more data?" So he's now joined Marini on the slower engine, if you like, and but the big news, I guess, for the Hondas is it sounds like the next step in that engine comes next time in Austria. We sort of
yeah,
teased it out of a couple of riders, and also they should all get it seems this new engine. So that includes Zarco and Nakagami at LCR. So it would probably be, well, it sounds like it'd be quite a big update in that 4 bikes all with this new engine, or certainly a revised configuration, to use their exact words. And who knows what other parts? I don't think it's just the engine. There might be a whole package. So, yeah, Mir was talking very much about sort of getting through this weekend. That there's better things to come. Make the most of the package now, but there are better things coming. And as you say, Marini, he's building momentum, isn't he?
he is. Yeah,
It's been a pretty difficult, isn't it, first half of the year, but he can see the light, I think, at the end of the tunnel. And as you say, he lost the point today. He gained it due to tyre pressure, didn't he, previously?
true.
Now he's lost 1 point due to tyre pressure.
Yeah,
So I suppose it's sort of balanced out. But either way, they're not in the positions they want to be fighting for. But yeah, certainly there'll be a lot of attention on what these upgrades do in Austria, which is quite a power track as well. So they'll be pleased to have a bit more engine performance there.
yeah. It's interesting with Honda because Joan Mir, you say he didn't really like the spec of engine, but he says today it's best he felt all weekend on the bike. He unfortunately had to retire the bike, and he was, like you said, they were all kind of with each other in the Grand Prix, and that's, I mean, at least they're consistent that way. You can kind of see the performances of different specs of engine. Zarco again being the top Honda, and yeah, I think there's some positives there that they're all kind of on the same page. It's just trying to get them to make the next step, and that's where they keep saying it's a bit away still, but at least they have the direction. That they went the wrong way at the start of the year, but they're back to where they kind of at the start point again, and they're going towards the right way. It's so hard to put a time frame on it, but yeah, I think there's a bit of optimism, small bit for Honda at least going into the second half of the year. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as you say, the fact that all the riders are together suggests that they need new parts. They need
Yeah,
some new things on the bike. It's not that one rider needs to catch up to another rider or something like that. They're all pretty much together. They're all saying the same things, aren't they, about the turning, the traction, and everything else. They've got 2 different specs of engines, as you say again, that they're gathering data on both of these ones, the original sort of spec, if you like, which has a bit more power, and then this newer spec, which, to use Mir's words, he sees this current engine that well, this, I suppose, was the last race for it, as being taking 1 step back to take 2 steps forward in future. That's his attitude of
yeah,
running this engine. I mean, I asked him how much he loses on the straights, and he said somewhere like this, 1 to 1.5 seconds just on the straight, but the rider can't do anything, as he said. So
yeah,
that's the level that they can find just by getting more performance out of this new spec engine, if you like. We don't know any more about the differences than that. They just call it a new spec or a different spec and everything else. But
yeah,
anyway, let's see. Yeah, certainly in Austria, one of the priorities for it presumably will be similar character, but a lot more power, a lot more top end,
yeah,
or a lot more ultimate performance, let's say.
yeah. It should be. I'm interested to see how that performs in Austria in a few weeks' time. Of course, we had the liveries this week, Pete. It was quite cool to see all the different variations. Sure you heard me and Alex Christ talking about what we liked, what we didn't like, but I do think it was Yeah, it was quite nice to see for a weekend. Bit of a shame we didn't see it for more. I thought they would have done it in the sprint, but yeah, what was your sort of standout livery or liveries that you looked at and went, yeah, there's a real tribute to the history of MotoGP.
Yeah, I think there was sort of a common theme, wasn't there? That things like the Aprilia, the Honda, the Yamaha, I think that those were sort of up there on quite a lot of people's lists. As you say, it was a bit strange. You can understand why they didn't run them, I suppose, all weekend, the risk of
Of
riders
course.
crashing, and then you've only got a limited number of fairings and everything else. But as you say, it would have been nice if they'd run them a bit more, because it was a bit of a shock, I think, well, probably the spectators as well, that you're trying to identify the riders when they've never been on track in these colours until warm up this morning. But I think as an idea, and as a, to sort of celebrate the 75th anniversary and everything else, I think it was great. It made the race different, didn't it? And it brought a lot of interest to Thursday, and you had Paul Spargaro dressing up in his Peaky Blinder gear and everything else, which seemed to amuse Marc Marquez a lot.
Yeah.
So as an idea and as a concept, and getting all the teams to look back and sort of bring out something from their past. I think it was a great idea, and it worked well. I think the fans liked it, and it gets people talking, doesn't it, about MotoGP? Which, let's face it, is what we need when yet again the fan numbers were not fantastic this weekend, and we also know now, don't we, that it's going to be, the race is moving to May next year. So
Yeah.
how much difference will that make? Who knows? But certainly a much earlier date in the season for Silverstone in 2025.
Yeah, just to come on to the liveries first, yeah, I loved it. I love seeing the Aprilia, like you said. I thought they nailed it with just their colours. The Chesterfield theme stuff was amazing. I mean, Honda's always going to look good if you just copy anything from history. They went with the Freddie Spencer livery. Looks so nice. And yeah, the only one that disappointed me was maybe the factory Ducati one. Actually won it. I think it didn't really look like they were going for that sort of Marde look. But there's so many sponsors on there, it didn't really look like it. It's just a bit brighter, of course, with the red. But yeah, a great idea. Like I say, I hope we see something like it in the future again. And yeah, going on the topic of this weekend and fans being here and the movement next year, like you say, of the dates from August to May. Do you think that's going to make a difference, Pete? Because the crowds were pretty much down again on last year's numbers from today. And is this a move to try and secure more people during summer? Well, it's a half-term holiday, it'll be a bank holiday weekend in May. How is this going to work for Silverstone? Because the racing is good and the facilities are amazing, but it just seems fairly quiet.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose why not try it? I suppose because, as you say, they've had this sort of August, early September date now for a long time, and the numbers are not really changing, are they? Recently, we're on just looking now, Sunday 42,000. Total for the weekend 117,000, but certainly the race day, that's the one that sort of grabs people's attention. It's not that great, was it? So,
No,
let's see if that makes a difference for Silverstone. They're sort of billing it as MotoGP would be the first of their big three events that they have each year, with the Formula One in July and the Silverstone Festival sort of late summer. So, to be honest, I don't know how much difference that would make, but they're saying it's going to be the first, moving it to the front, if you like, of the order. As you say, the bank holiday thing, what difference will that make? Is that going to get more people in? But then, as we've been talking about in the media room, there's a lot of high profile motor races on at the end of May, aren't there?
There's so many. Yeah.
You'll know them all more than me, but certainly the Monaco F1, isn't there? There's the Indy 500.
You've got the Le Mans TT started the day after the Silverstone race next year in May. Even before that, a few weeks before, you've got the Northwest 300. You've got just a lot of events around then. So, yeah, it's a bit unclear for me to see how this is going to pay off, but let's see if it does. Yeah, I think there's a lot more things to address at Silverstone other than just changing the date. I think we need to look at fan costs and, just trying to incentivize people to come to MotoGP, because when you're here and you're seeing the bikes, Pete, you know what it's like. You can really get a sense for the speed and how great these machines actually are on track.
Yeah, and you raised the point about the fans, and I suppose that's one of the things that jumps out of you when you look at the numbers, is 39,000 on Saturday and then only 42 on Sunday. So there's not we're not getting that great big
You
step
know,
that you would expect to get for race day. And so is that also to do with the cost? Obviously tickets are cheaper on Saturday, but you now get qualifying, a sprint race
sprints, yeah.
and everything else. So maybe people are deciding, you know what, go on the Saturday, and then so maybe they need to look at doing more things on a Sunday morning. It's something that quite a lot of us say when we arrive Sunday morning for the race. It's you have a 10-minute warm up, and then there's almost seems to be a lot of waiting around for something to happen. There were, of course, support races here, weren't there? Georgia
Yeah,
was a super stock, and
yeah,
we were interested in some of the big names in that. There's the British Talent Cup, as well as the usual Moto3, Moto2, of course, and let's face it, we should point out that those that did come today, they got to see a home British winner in Moto2.
exactly.
So there we are. Last race of the day. So it was a funny order as well, so we had the Moto3, MotoGP, Moto2 last. And while the MotoGP riders are speaking, you're sort of looking up at the screen at the Moto2
Yeah,
race. And Jake Dixon, there we are, last lap pass and wins it. So from that point of view, that there's a home rider to support. He's on the top step of the podium, and he got a great reception and everything. It's just a shame that there weren't more fans
any
here to sort
people.
of see that happen.
Yeah, it's almost kind of akin to the comments that Silverstone made prior to the F1, where they said they needed British drivers at the front to try and get more people in for F1, and obviously it helped that Lewis Hamilton won here a few weeks ago. And like you say, Jake Dixon winning the Moto2, it is great for Silverstone to have a British winner. And yeah, it was the last race of the day, and it's like people have left after MotoGP potentially, and they're not going to see that. It's like, well,
Well,
it was brilliant, but I think, yeah, I don't get how that's gonna trying to get more people back next year, because a lot of people I've seen on social media have made their minds up about Silverstone. They're not really, they wanted it Donington, but I think here is the best place for MotoGP, and it needs to have more. Yeah, it just needs more people, doesn't it? Really?
that's it. Yeah, that's it, Jordan. It would be very hard to fit everything into Donington that a modern MotoGP paddock needs. I mean, Silverstone is several times bigger, isn't it, in terms of the land size? And so that's also why it's quite hard to judge the crowd numbers, and we always have to wait literally until the official figures come out, because when you come in, we talk about traffic, but then Silverstone's always pretty good with traffic because obviously they're used to the F1
Yeah,
with bigger crowds, so that's never really a judge, because you expect Silverstone to be on top of that, and they usually are. So then you're looking in the grandstands, but then again, there's so many grandstands. Obviously, the F1 race was quite recently, so a lot of the F1 grandstands are still up and things like that. So it's really hard to gauge the number of fans. It's really hard, I suppose, to get that sort of atmosphere feel where you've got a lot of people packed into one area, because it's such a massive track.
yeah,
It's the age-old problem that they've had at Silverstone really certainly in recent years. What do they need to get the fans in? And really, I think you've got to speak to the fans. I mean, you've got to do really in-depth research and speak to people that buy the tickets, speak to people that don't buy the tickets, and
yeah,
find out exactly what they want, because they're not short of trying things here, putting on concerts and everything else.
yeah.
And the ticket prices, of course, everyone, it's the cost of living prices and everything else, but at the same time, well, the cost of the Formula One Grand Prix tickets here
And
is
it's
what,
a near
double?
sellout. Yeah,
And it's a near sellout. So the cost alone doesn't, I know it's a different audience and everything else, but the cost alone doesn't sort of explain everything, I don't think.
yeah, it's spot on. I think we'll cover it in more detail eventually down the line, but that's pretty much everything from this week's British Grand Prix review. It was a great
Sweet.
weekend for Enea Bastianini, and yeah, head to Austria next. And I think it's fair to say we have three riders potentially in this title fight going forward. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure to subscribe, and all the business on the YouTube channel. Leave a comment, like the video. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a review. It helps out massively. And yeah, we'll see you next week for another podcast.